Well, Douglas, do you feel the government's been doing a bad job both internationally and domestically?
Not a bad job, no. There are certainly quibbles to be made, and one of the good things, as far as I can see about this report, is that it's not by any means a wholesale sort of attack on government policy, and I think the Conservative Party actually ought to be congratulated for being relatively non-partisan in the way it's approached this. I mean, it seems to sort of acknowledge where the government has got things right and acknowledges where it hasn't. So I think it's more constructive than I was perhaps anticipating it would be.
But, and where would you quibble with the government's then approach on matters?
Domestically.
Do you share Darwin's categorisation of appeasement, for example?
To an extent, yes. Look, I mean, one of the things which this report notes, which is a genuine improvement and quite a milestone for this country anyway, is making it very clear that you shouldn't be treating, in particular, Muslim communities within Britain purely as a religious group. This is a very important thing which the government has so far in this country got wrong. The Labour government's got fantastically wrong. We're approaching people through the mosque, approaching people through their alleged religious leaders, who don't represent a significant swathe of Muslims in this country. And the government, by treating them purely as a religious group and treating them only as a group which have religious leaders, has made a great mistake here and actually, I think, encouraged extremism or encouraged fundamentalism. And if the followings of this report are followed, I think we'd genuinely be in a better place.
Okay, well,
now, when it comes to the question of community cohesion and fundamentalism, let's be clear, this isn't just about Muslim fundamentalism. In all the world's religions, we have a fundamentalist problem. We have, in America, a big problem of religious fundamentalism. We have American generals telling their troops to go off and do God's work.
One case where that happened.
Well, I didn't interrupt you. Let me just wrap up. We have American celebrity authors, not ostracized or criticized by politics, like Ann Coulter, who write about conquering the Islamic world and converting them to Christians. And we find ourselves in the idiotic situation where the coalition is allowing groups of Korean Christians to go about trying to do God's work in the heart of Afghanistan. Now, what more idiotic policy can you pursue? A, if you want to have people who aren't going to get themselves kidnapped, which would seem to be a daft thing in the first place, and secondly, to try to convince people you're not about to carry out a crusade when you're sending Christian missionaries into the heart of their country. I can see you're seething.
Yes,
well,
go on.
Look, first of all, let's get it straight. Ann Coulter doesn't speak for anyone in the American government or anyone in the American administration.
I didn't say she did. I said that she's lauded on the circuit and not disavowed.
No. Look, she is disavowed. You will not find members of the administration who will back what Ann Coulter is saying. There's a good reason, which is they recognise that she is a popular crackpot. That does not mean she speaks to the American administration, or indeed for the American people. She's a popular fool. Look, it is not official government policy in America or in Britain to send waves of Korean missionaries into Afghanistan. It is something that has happened, but is not policy of the US government. It is not the policy of the US government to evangelize in Afghanistan or Iraq. We'd know if it were. You talk about crusade.
You think there is a policy?
You talk about crusade.
I haven't noticed much of a policy.
Slip of the tongue of George Bush, a stupid and regrettable slip of the tongue.
Do you think he regrets it?
I think he does, very much so. And look, I mean, there's one really easy way to not deal with the big problem of our time, by which, of course, I mean Islamist fundamentalism. There's one big problem. There's one big way of skirting around the issue, and that is to pretend that all religions have fundamentalists and all fundamentalisms are the same, and you know, we have Bible Belt Christians in America. Well, look, when a Christian does do something reprehensible, when they pretend to do so in the name of God, they do not get the backing, financial or otherwise, of the Western
Well, we've got 500,000 dead in Iraq right now. There's more than Al-Qaeda can dream of.
Not done in the name of God, not done in the name of America, not done because America are killing those people.
Largely done in the name of God.
Done in the name, I think you'll find, of Allah, by people who kill their co-religionists. Maybe to spite America, but nevertheless it's them that's murdering their co-religionists.
The vast majority of deaths in Iraq are either caused by the collapse of healthcare or mostly, according to all the statistics, as a result of coalition military action.
Let us break this up 1 minute.
Talk to doctors.
Let's hit it back to the report, though.
you.
If I could say, just to have a little look at some more of the specifics here in terms of what's going on. It seems that the Conservative Party's approach can be broadly classified, if you like, Douglas, as more libertarian in action, and Labour perhaps a bit more on the authoritarian side, particularly when it comes to measures looking at domestic security. Now, let's look, for example, at detention of suspects without charge, where, of course, there have been hints the government would like to increase the days that people can be held from 28 to maybe 56 has been canvassed as an option. The Conservatives have come out absolutely against that, as have the Liberal Democrats, saying that his against civil liberties doesn't serve any purpose. Again, the whole ID cards issue as well has fallen on very similar paths along that way. I mean, can we see this divide, and which of those approaches strikes you as being the more effective in dealing with terrorism?
I don't think it's. I mean, you could say that the Conservative Party is sort of outflanking Labour on this issue at the moment. I mean, it's seen if it keeps doing this as the sort of more liberal party on these issues, and anti-authoritarian measures, as you say, like ID cards and like 90 days. I think this isn't actually a problem with the Conservative Party. It's a problem with the Labour Party not making its case very well. The Labour government, if it does want to extend the periods of detention without trial, really does have to make a much better case for why it's needed. In the absence of that case being made, of course, the Conservative Party is going to be opposed to it. I thought that was sort of evident.
So I think an overemphasis on religion in general has been the bane of this government, and we need to remember the importance of reason and the Enlightenment overall, and the protection of the values in the Enlightenment.
Well, this is a false antithesis that's being set up, the notion that reason and enlightenment stand on the opposite end of the spectrum from faith, and as you know from the Regensburg Address and many, many other things, faith and reason are not opposites. Or not regarded as being so by large swathes of this country and others. And once again, the problem is not religion as a whole, the problem is Islamism. It is political Islam. That is the problem. We do not have a great problem in this country with extreme Hindus.
Douglas has got a point, hasn't he, Dan? I mean, forget about America for one moment. In this country, the problem is Islamic fundamentalism, isn't it? That's the community, if you like, that is most cause for concern.
Well, indeed, but if you look at the countries where we have been doing our conquering and our dominating, it isn't India. They got rid of us 60 years ago. If you look at...
so in your view, terrorism is absolutely caused by foreign policy?
Not entirely, but it is a huge factor. And indeed, our own intelligence services said so in advance of the Iraq war. This is not a George Galloway position. If you look at the American CIA Sher's book, Imperial Hubris, he wrote that bin Laden was... it was as if bin Laden had been sitting in a cave chanting with mind control over Bush, please invade Iraq. That's the view of the CIA.
One man,
not
the CIA, and the CIA, in any case.
The CIA is a bunch of useless liberals. We know that, and should be closed down, I'm sure, and replaced by
I'm glad you agree.
Wonderful, we reached an agreement on that.
We agree on that point.
Foreign policy,
useless and overfunded
foreign policy,
bureaucracy.
the cause of terrorism?
No, of course not. I mean, is it an aggravating factor? Yes, probably. But then you're offered the choice of whether or not you have the chance to run your own foreign policy on your own terms as you see fit, and see fit to protect your own people and to help people in other countries, or you decide to have that policy dictated by people who let off car bombs in Baghdad or London or anywhere else. So that is the choice being offered you if people decide that we honestly ought to listen to Islamist...
extremist wing. It isn't a question of Islamist as a whole. We're dealing with a particular faction within a faction of Sunni Islam. With respect to most of this, and most Islamic people, are as extreme as you or I might be Church of England. They like their drink and their pork and the rest of it. So let's not get carried away with this. But I must return to this question. It is only Islam. I had the great pleasure of being at John Bolton, President Bush's one of his favourite diplomats, his confirmation hearing with Jesse Helms. And Jesse Helms, up front, he said, people have criticised me, and I won't do a cod South Carolina accent here, people have criticised me, said Jesse, for saying that at the end times of the Book of Revelations are coming, and that John Bolton is the sort of person I want to have standing beside me in those times, and I reiterate those times are coming. John Bolton is the sort of person I want to have beside me at that time. And he was chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, elected by his peers in the Republican Party, and nobody came out with a white coat and took him away. That's the ideology driving this administration.
Last word on the subject?
Well, it's evidently not the ideology driving this administration, otherwise they'd be doing different things, and they'd probably be doing them more successfully, and they would be more open about what they're doing. The fact is that the White House, the current administration in Washington, does tend to dive between policy and policy. It comes over all liberal interventionist, but then rushes back to an old-school realist style of approach when things go badly wrong. If it had any really clear drive like that, we would see it. As it is, we see a strange flip-flopping inability to stick the course on any one particular direction, and I think that's
an ideology. I wouldn't say the ideology, so I'd agree with you there.
Right, we've reached agreement. I'm going to stop it there. At the moment, are we exporting, authoritarianism through capitalism? Is that the way?
Right, it's a long time since I was able to stomach any long event at SOAS.
A long time since you were able to stomach any long event at SOAS. Well, in terms of sort of broad brush dismissal of one of the world's top universities.
Oh, I don't know.
Come on.
Is it? I wasn't aware of that.
Pretty shocking. What was the conclusion? That's interesting. Douglas, Lebanon dangerously split. We've seen various attempts to topple the government. Dare to make a prediction about the local election result?
Hard to say. I haven't been out there for a year or so, and I'm assured by friends who are there and have just come back that, yes, feeling on the ground against Hezbollah is sort of satisfyingly high.
Really?
I hope that remains the case. I hope they realise the extent to which Hezbollah, much like Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, has used their country as a launch pad and should take responsibility when the people it launches against hit back.